Welcome everyone to Moz's 4th annual Lobby Day webinar, designed to help you feel prepared for Lobby Day in Olympia next week. We have changed up the order of topics for the webinar this year. Everyone note that you should be muted as you enter for sound quality. At the end, we'll have time for questions and be able to allow you to unmute yourselves, but we do ask that you please keep yourself muted for sound quality during the first portion of the webinar. We will start today with a brief overview of the Lobby Day schedule and then review the legislative agenda for this year. This content will be followed by lobbying tips from our lobbyist, Amber. After that, I will share with you some more tips as well as a little bit about why Midwife Lobby Day is so important. We will also review the art of the elevator speech, and we will conclude with Lobby Day logistics, including information about where to park. Finally, we will wrap up by responding to your questions. You can also type questions in the chat box at any time. This webinar is being recorded and will be uploaded to YouTube when available, so you can pass it on to others who may not be able to attend today. Look for the video link on the Moz Facebook page or in an email from us. If you're on the computer, you can see our schedule for Lobby Day. It's featured here on a slide with a yawning baby. But Lobby Day is not actually boring. In fact, a longtime midwife who came last year for the first time commented that she was surprised how energizing and enjoyable the day was. This schedule for the day can also be found on the Moz website. Also, look for a follow-up email from us later today. If you don't get that email, we may not have updated contact information for you. You can update your email address at moz.wildapricot.org/join-us, and that will be in the chat box as well, to make sure you get any emails we send next week with updates, including links to the legislative agenda, talking points, and more. As you can see here, we start off Lobby Day with a briefing at 8 a.m. in the home of our generous lobbyist, Amber, who allows us to use her home as a base camp for the day. She is located within close walking distance to the Capitol, where we will spend the day. Her address is 1610 Water Street, Southwest Olympia. From there, you will follow your team lead to appointments. Starting at noon, lunch will be available at Amber's. If you would like to take advantage of this option, bring $8 cash for 2 slices of pizza and salad. In the afternoon, we will be taking a group photo in the beautiful marble rotunda in the middle of the Ledge building, LEG, which is the one that looks like a breast with a rather prominent nipple. The exact timing of the photo will be announced at the morning briefing. After appointments, we hope you will skip traffic and stay for dinner at Audrey's house at 6 p.m. The address for dinner is 217 17th Avenue, Southeast Olympia. And you can walk there from Amber's. If you plan to come to Lobby Day, and especially if you plan to stay for dinner, please RSVP to Sasha at moz.legislative.liaison@gmail.com. You can find her email in the chat box. And now I would like to turn the slides over to Audrey Levine.
Thanks, Kristen. Hi, everyone, and thanks for taking the time to be with us today. I believe this is the 3rd year now that we've done a Lobby Day webinar, and I just want to acknowledge you, Kristen, for coming up with the idea and for all the work that you've done making sure that everyone, and especially the student midwives, show up on Lobby Day really excited and well prepared. My name is Audrey Levine. I've been the chair of the Moz Legislative and Health Policy Committee for the past 17 years. And as many of you know, my other hat is that I'm co-president of the National Association of Certified Professional Midwives, or NACPM. And from that perspective, I can tell you that Washington State continues to play a key role in inspiring midwives and midwifery consumers in other states to work toward greater integration of midwifery into the healthcare system and greater access for all childbearing people to this model of care. And while it's thrilling that 5 states have passed CPM licensure laws in the last 2 years, there are still only 13 states, including Washington, in which Medicaid reimburses for the care provided by CPMs and licensed midwives. So what we do here in Washington really matters. Next slide, please. A case in point, In 2017, Moz's legislative efforts resulted in a tripling of the Medicaid reimbursement rate for the birth center facility fee. This not only enabled the existing 18 licensed birth centers to expand services to families on Medicaid, it's also made it possible for a new birth center to open in Pullman, Washington, a rural area with a high Medicaid population where access to these services had previously been unavailable. Next slide, please. So this is our 2018 legislative agenda. I know you can't read it, but we will be distributing to legislative offices this one-pager on Lobby Day. So this year, in addition to ensuring that sufficient funds are allocated to maintain the $525 cap on the midwifery licensing fee, we'll be educating legislators about the unique value and benefits of midwifery care, and specifically building a case for protecting the term birth center in statute. Next slide, please. So these are our 4 main goals for Lobby Day this year, and I'm going to talk about each one of them individually. Next slide, please. Most of you are very familiar with the 2007 cost-benefit study, which was commissioned by the Washington State Legislature, and it demonstrated the significant cost savings that licensed midwifery care confers to the state of Washington. This study, which was based on Medicaid data from 2001 to 2004, when there were only about 100 licensed midwives in the state, showed that we saved the state nearly $500,000 biennially. And the study only evaluated the savings based on avoided C-sections. It didn't factor into the equation facility fees and other costly routine hospital interventions such as epidurals. Next slide, please. Additionally, the study confirmed what other national and international risk-adjusted studies have shown, that midwifery care and community-based birth are safer options for those with healthy low-risk pregnancies and result in significantly lower C-section rates, as well as lower rates of other costly interventions like epidurals, as well as higher breastfeeding rates, both of which contribute to better long-term health. In our visits on Lobby Day, we'll encourage legislators to go to the Moz website and look at our e-packet, which includes this landmark cost-benefit study. Next slide, please. So referencing the 2007 cost-benefit study will be important when we ask members to request that $50,000 be approved from the general fund in order to maintain the $525 cap on the midwifery licensing fee. As most of you know, Moz has been successful in maintaining the fee cap since 2009, primarily because of the cost-benefit study and the fact that it proved that it was worth it to the state to continue subsidizing the midwifery program. Last year, unfortunately, Moz got misinformation from the Department of Health about the amount of funding that the midwifery program would need from the general fund. And so to carry out the intent of the budget proviso that passed last year, we will need an additional appropriation. And it's worth noting that while $50,000 may seem like a lot of money, and we might get pushback from some legislators, in the context of the overall state budget, this is not a big ask. We will want to thank legislators for the fee cap and let them know that we've been able to grow our profession dramatically over the past 9 years, in part because of this fee cap. That without it, licensed midwives would be paying over $1,500 a year. And we'll want to share with them, too, that we're anticipating a $25 fee increase in 2018, which will be up to the level of the cap. And Moz is remaining neutral on this because we don't believe it will be cost prohibitive to current licensed midwives or those entering the profession. Also because we're grateful that the cap has been in place for 9 years. We also know that other healthcare professions will be experiencing fee increases this year. And we also want to convey that we are doing our part to ensure the long-term viability of our regulatory and disciplinary program at the DOH. Next slide, please. So as a follow-up to our legislative efforts last year, which resulted in the tripling of the Medicaid reimbursement rate for the birth center facility fee, Moz had hoped to pursue legislation this session to protect the term birth center in statute. However, after conferring with other stakeholder organizations, including the Washington State Hospital Association, we've decided to use this session and the interim to educate legislators and other interested parties, including hospitals, about the rationale for this action. If passed, This would require hospitals that have been calling their labor and delivery units family birth centers to change their name. And it would also require hospitals that are building outpatient birthing facilities on their campuses to have them licensed and regulated as a birth center, or called something else, perhaps alongside midwifery units like in the UK. In bringing forward this amendment, Moz wants to be really clear that we fully support recent efforts of hospitals in Washington state to provide greater access for childbearing families to care that promotes normal physiologic birth. And we believe that this will reduce healthcare costs and benefit public health by lowering the rate of C-sections. However, it's crucial to capture accurate data on the outcomes achieved in various birth settings and to be transparent about differences so that birthing families can choose their care accordingly. Next slide, please. Finally, we'll be asking for support for House Bill 2016, which would require jails and the DOC to make reasonable accommodations for the provision of midwifery and doula services to incarcerated people who are either pregnant or have recently given birth. We testified in support of House Bill 2016 last year, and it did pass unanimously on the House floor, but didn't make it over to the Senate. Representative DeBolt has reintroduced the bill, and it's currently in the House Rules Committee. So we're going to be asking representatives to support House Bill 2016 and asking senators to support it when it comes over to the Senate. Next slide, please. So typically we get a really good number of midwifery consumers showing up on Lobby Day, which is great because then they can speak directly to legislators about their experience of midwifery care. It really is particularly compelling when the beneficiaries of midwifery care speak to legislators and not just the providers of that care. And of course, as I like to say, the cute babies are definitely an asset in our visits. So if you're a midwifery consumer, please know that your presence on Lobby Day is valuable and appreciated. And if you're a midwife, please encourage your clients to come and share their experiences. Next slide, please. So I hope to see you all on January 18th in Olympia. And if you're not able to make it down here, please do contact your representatives either by phone or by email and ask them to support Moz's legislative agenda. You'll find the agenda and the talking points on the Moz website. Next slide, please. Thanks for listening. There will be time at the end of the webinar for questions, but also please feel free to contact me. And now I'd like to introduce the amazing Amber Ulvanis, our fearless and fabulous lobbyist and home birth mama.
Thank you, Audrey. I'm thrilled and honored to be your lobbyist and have been for the last 10 years since I quit my legislative staff job when I had my second baby at home with Audrey, who then took advantage of my vulnerable state and recruited me to become a lobbyist. But it's definitely my honor. Next slide, please. This is me. Next slide. Okay, so I wanted to start out with a little bit of context of where we're landing during the legislative session and how the legislature plans to run their legislative session this year. So this is a short session year. The years alternate between long session years when they write a 2-year budget and a short session year, which is primarily for adjustments to the full budget, and they run policy bills during both. This is a short session year, which means it's 60 days. It's likely to end in 60 days and not go overtime because this is an important election year and members are anxious to get out and start campaigning. So this visual that you have before you shows you the pacing of the session and our cutoffs for moving legislation through. If you only have budget issues, their budget proposals start coming out towards the end, a few weeks before the end of the legislative session, and then is negotiated right down to the very last day. Next slide. So political context for our work this year, it's different than last year in that we have a Democratic majority in each of the 3 chambers. So in House Democrats remain in control as they were before, 50 Democrats to 48 Republicans. In the Senate, there was one seat that swung from the majority coalition caucus to Democrat, giving the Democrats now a one-vote majority over now what is the minority caucus coalition. And the governor's office remains with our Democratic leader, Jay Inslee. So it's the change in the Senate that makes the makeup to the political environment different this year. Next slide. So now I'm going to go into talking a bit more about approach to communicating with your legislators. If you have more questions about political environment and budget, I'm happy to answer those questions later. But there are various ways that you can communicate with your member. Of course, we encourage anyone who can to be here in person on Lobby Day. Those are the most effective ways to get to your members. But emails, calls, mail, those are all still effective ways. And even if you can't come, we highly encourage you to communicate with your legislator on our legislative agenda and issues relating to midwifery that are valuable to you and that you would like for them to know about. Next slide. So now I'm going to go over 5 tips for meeting with your legislator for people that are coming in person. Next slide, please. So first, I encourage you to prepare. All legislators have a bio online at the legislative website, which is listed here, leg.wa.gov. I think it's helpful to know a bit about your members before you go in, and you can get a feel for what they care about and their line of work, which can be helpful. And prepare your comments, who you are and what you do, what your issue is about and why you care, and what you want that legislator to do. And we're going to hear a bit more about creating your message a little later in this webinar. And also be ready to meet with staff instead of the legislator. Things are so hectic on the Hill during session, and even if a legislator is intending to meet with you, sometimes they get pulled to the governor's office or pulled into a negotiation, and we end up meeting with staff. And I just want to let you know that those are still very valuable meetings to be able to talk with staff about the issues, and that they then pass that information along to the member. Next slide, please. So at the meeting, so these are often short meetings, 15 minutes, sometimes less, sometimes a little more, but definitely be prepared for having a short meeting in which you will need to deliver your message and listen. I think that often it's the case that people want to get their message across or are a little nervous and to do lots of talking and not take the time to listen to their member or allow them to ask them questions. If you don't know the answers to their questions, it's completely fine just to say, oh, well, I'll have to look into that and get back to you. Or alternatively, say, we'll have Amber, our lobbyist, stop back in with that answer. Next slide. So ask for a commitment. Part of the purpose of your meeting with your legislators is to build a relationship. These are people that are in your community, and we would like for you to get to know them, to be able to talk to them in your community when it's not legislative session. But we're also there for specific legislative asks. So this is a bit new in my advice this year. You know, historically, we have asked for support, and we have found that support doesn't quite get far enough, because even if a legislator says, I support you, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to take action on our requested items. So if they're supportive, they express their support, thank them, and then ask them for the specific action, such as a vote, asking them to make a budget request to their budget chair. And I think we went ahead one slide a little too early. Sorry. Okay, sorry. So anyhow, we're going to, in particular this year, we're going to ask them to make a budget request, as well as vote on some, there may be other bills, in particular the Midwives and Doulas in Prisons bill, that we will be asking for a vote. And we will be giving you talking points on each of these, so you'll know just what to say when we're making the request of funding for them. If they're undecided, offer to send them more information, and we will follow up with them. And then kind of back to the idea of getting to know them, request that they use you as a resource, that they, you know, when you're meeting with your own legislators, that they know that you are from their community, and that regardless of the time of year, you can be a resource for them on midwifery issues. Next slide. So leave the door open for future advocacy. We, without a doubt, have meetings every year that are not so friendly. Fortunately, those are by far the minimal. We have a lot of enthusiastic supporters here, and I can tell you now, already this week, as I've been meeting with legislators and staff, I've heard, oh yeah, oh, I love the midwives. So they're happy to see us. They're happy to see you when you come in. And just know that we should treat them all respectfully, and maybe they're not so supportive on a particular issue. Maybe they are grumpy about giving us additional money for the licensing fee cap, but those are people that are opportunities to build relationships with, and that maybe are an ally on a future issue. And I think just always thanking them and thanking the aide in particular for the time. It's great. It's wonderful that we can meet with our legislators during the legislative session. Next slide. Lastly, follow up. We're going to leave a one-pager with them. Sometimes members don't want to take paper. There are some offices that are even going for one-pagers fully electronic. So, you know, follow-up emails are important to send a link to our legislative one-pager. And in particular, thanking them and reminding them of any commitments that they made to you, you know, to let them know that you remember and that you'll be checking that they follow through on their commitment. Next slide, please. And now I'm going to turn it over to Kristen Efland, who has a presentation and will let you know why our lobby day is so important.
Thanks, Amber. My name's Kristen Efland. I'm a midwife across the Cascade Mountains in Central Washington, and a Moz Legislative and Health Policy Committee member. I'm excited to spend a few minutes with you today as we prepare for Moz Lobby Day in Olympia next week on Thursday, January 18th. But today, I'd like to start us off with the great toddler question, why? Why do Washington midwives and supporters travel to Olympia to spend the day there educating our elected officials once a year? I'd love to share the answer with you because it's what I love about lobbying. Interacting with the members who represent the legislative branch of our democracy. This work is filled with potential and opportunity. For those of you here who are midwives or aspiring midwives, I would venture to bet that most of us wanted to enter the profession of midwifery for more than one reason. We wanted to be midwives, but I believe that most of us also want to affect change. To change the culture of pregnancy and childbirth for all pregnant persons and their families, who we also hope will come participate in Lobby Day. This is no small charge, but your annual participation in Lobby Day, whether you're a midwife, a consumer, a family member, a student, or an apprentice, can help bring about the change you wish to see, especially on a policy level. Changes to our profession, including increased access to the profession, which also includes the affordability and sustainability of practicing in Washington, and changes to the wider culture. Perhaps you can tell after spending just a few minutes with me that I'm an optimist. In reality, we know that change is often more slow and incremental than we want it to be. But when you look over time and see what we have been able to accomplish historically, you can begin to see the cumulative effect of our ability to influence policy. Don't underestimate the potential of your annual participation and engagement. Now that we have an answer to our toddler question, why, we can move on to the type of question we might get from our teenagers. What has lobbying done for me? Even if you have never participated in Lobby Day or never contacted your representatives to advocate on your own behalf or on the behalf of parents, babies, and families, Moz has been working for you, organizing a midwife lobby day in the state capitol for decades. And even before Moz officially existed, midwives, consumers, and student midwives worked on our behalf, educating legislators and affecting policy changes, from which we and our clients still benefit today. Much of what you think about as the defining characteristics of practicing licensed midwifery in Washington was won through advocacy. The work accomplished by those that have gone before us has been awesome, but there is more to be done. There is much more potential for us to actualize. To reach this potential, we need your participation and that of our colleagues. We hope that more of us can make it to Olympia in person each year, and for those who can't make it, we hope you will contact your representatives on your own time. This slide lists some examples of the potential influence we could have. I am passionate about getting more midwives, consumers, apprentices, and students to Lobby Day each year. I have always imagined that one reason we have had such low participation some years by practicing midwives might be due to a lack of information. This webinar was designed to help you feel more prepared and informed, and to help you see why your participation is vital. We have organized this webinar today to help you feel ready to come to Lobby Day and join a team as we approach our lawmakers with the goal of effecting positive policy changes for our profession and the families we serve. It is important to realize that it is more enjoyable for your legislators to meet with you and get to know you, their constituents, the people whom they came to Olympia to represent and serve, than to always meet with professional lobbyists whom they see every day and whom they know are hired to represent various interests. While the role of professional lobbying is also critical to our legislative successes, you as a constituent have a special and unique role to play. While you may not know a lot about lobbying, you do know a lot about midwifery. You are the expert in the room when it comes to midwifery and how the midwifery model of care affects parents, babies, and families. You are there to make our issues personal and help your legislator see your concerns and hopes through your eyes. We are going to go over some of the facts and figures and details today, but you don't need to memorize everything. Your role at Lobby Day is to be yourself and convey your personal message as it relates to our legislative agenda. Don't worry if you can't remember all the details or can't answer a question. That is one of the things we hire our lobbyist Amber for, and she can always be back in touch with anyone you meet who needs more information. Stay tuned for more information about how to talk to your legislators. Rest assured, you do not have to visit them on your own. We travel to visit our legislators in teams, but I will conclude nonetheless with a slide containing some ideas for things you can say when meeting with a legislator when you don't know what else to say or do. And now I would like to turn the slides over to Heather Carey.
Thank you, Kristen, and hello to everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Heather Carey, and I serve as the director of Bastyr University's Center for Health Policy Leadership, where I work to expand regulatory recognition and workforce opportunities for the natural health professions. Today, I will be speaking about the elevator speech, delivering the perfect pitch, and its usefulness in promoting and advocating for your profession. Next slide, please. So what is an elevator speech? Essentially, it's a brief, prepared message that captures the essence of your profession or your organization or what you do as an individual. It's a pitch to spark interest or an understanding of the value of an idea, a service or project, your work, or your profession. Next slide, please. Why do you need an elevator speech? Having a prepared elevator speech provides you with a message that you can convey quickly and with confidence to spark the interest of others in wanting to support your idea, service, project, or profession, or at least spark an interest in learning more about it. Next slide, please. To create an elevator speech, you may first start by thinking of your objective. What is it that you will be trying to accomplish in your messaging? The next step is to craft a message that concisely explains what you do with the language that can be understood by someone who has no previous experience with your service, your idea, your project, or your profession. When crafting this message, also include language to convey your uniqueness and your value. Next slide, please. Perhaps most importantly, connect to the why of what you are doing or promoting. Why you do the work or support the work of those who do. Why you believe the work is important. Why the work is important for the community. Why the work is essential for health creation. And why the work is important to our healthcare system. Next slide, please. This next slide provides a template for you to utilize when creating your own elevator speech. By filling in the blanks, you are on your way to creating your own compelling message. Next slide, please. Here is an example elevator speech for midwifery and advocacy. Hello, my name is Heather Carey, and I'm here today to wholeheartedly support the midwifery profession. I know as a health policy professional and past consumer of midwifery care that midwives positively contribute to the health of individuals and our communities by lovingly and skillfully bringing humans into the world. My why? How a person comes into this world will impact that individual, the family, and the community for generations. We have a responsibility to welcome newborns with loving, experienced care. Next slide, please. Thank you for listening and your work as a midwife or midwifery advocate. And now I would like to give the slides back to Audrey so that she can walk you through with some logistics for Lobby Day. Thank you for the work you are doing as midwives and as advocates for the midwifery profession. I look forward to joining you in Olympia. And here's Audrey.
Thanks, Heather. So I'm going to start with directions, and you can follow the directions on this slide, and all the slides will be available after the webinar. So if you're coming either north or south on I-5, you can just follow the freeway signs right to the Capitol campus. Obviously, you can also Google the directions or use the directions available on the state Capitol website. Generally, traffic is pretty smooth through Olympia, but if you're coming south on I-5, There can be unpredictable slowdowns at the base, so you might want to Google conditions or check the Department of Transportation website. Somebody needs to mute themselves.
Warn them, but if the NST does not look good.
Heather, I think that's you.
Nope, I was muted and I'm by myself.
Okay, sorry. So our Lobby Day headquarters, as Kristen said at the beginning, will be at the home of our lobbyist, Amber. You can leave your gear there during the day and come back to relax and have a snack if you have a gap between appointments. Her house is about 2 blocks from the offices where we'll be meeting with legislators. And even though it's really close, it ends up being a lot of walking over the course of the day. So please be sure to wear comfortable shoes. At the end of the day, it's about a 5-minute walk from Amber's house to my house if you're staying for dinner. So you won't need to move your car. But please do remember that if you're coming for dinner, that you should RSVP to the email that you'll see at the end of these slides. At the beginning of the day, we'll be starting the briefing at 8:15 sharp at Amber's, and you don't want to miss the briefing. So please be sure to leave extra time for parking. There's a really limited amount of 2-hour parking in Amber's neighborhood, and parking is very strictly enforced during the legislative session. Next slide, please. The next closest parking is the campus visitor parking area. And again, these slides will be available after the webinar, so you can look up more detailed parking information. But the north and south diagonals and visitor information lots are the closest to Amber's house. They tend to fill up quickly. All the campus lots are $2 an hour from 8 to 5 p.m. And they do take credit and debit cards as well as cash. Next slide, please. The city of Olympia also has on-street parking, and the cost ranges from like 60 cents an hour to $1 an hour, and you pay from 8 to 5. If you want free parking and you don't mind walking about a half a mile, obviously weather depending, you can park on the Deschutes Parkway on the west side of Capitol Lake. And there's a walking path around the lake with a switchback path up to the Capitol campus. Next slide, please. Olympia operates a free shuttle that runs from the Capitol campus through the downtown core to the farmers market every 12 to 15 minutes throughout the day, so until 6 p.m. Unfortunately, the farmers market isn't open during the week at this time of year, but you can park there for $1.50 an hour and then take the dash. Next slide, please. Depending on your team's schedule, you'll probably have between 45 minutes and an hour and a half for lunch. And there are a couple of different options. You can bring your lunch and eat it on the Capitol campus if the weather is good. There are lots of nice places to sit and eat. Lots of people come back to Amber's for lunch. And as Kristen said, there'll be pizza available. When you check in the morning, you can purchase a ticket. So please have cash in hand. And exact amounts are really helpful. So it's $8 for 2 slices and salad. And if you want to go out for lunch, there are a few restaurants on Capitol Way within a couple of blocks of the Capitol campus. There's also a cafeteria in the Ledge building and another one right across from the House and Senate buildings, the Pritchard cafeteria. Most of the restaurants in Olympia are further downtown, so you probably aren't going to be able to get there at lunch, but it's not a bad thing to do after we're done, probably around 4 o'clock. If you want to take the dash downtown, there are places to go for a cup of coffee or a glass of wine, or to look at shops down there and decompress before dinner at my place at 6. So you can either walk or take the dash down to the main restaurant area. If you have kids, public library is about 6 blocks away from the Capitol and open from 11 to 7. We also have a really great children's museum, the Hands-On Children's Museum, that you would probably want to drive to because it's a fairly long walk, and they're open until 5. There's also a park with playground equipment about 12 blocks away, but it's pretty close to the Dash bus line. So if you have any additional questions about logistics, feel free to email Sasha Henry. So I think that's the next slide. No, not quite. Okay, where is her email? Oh, well, I guess we'll have to put it in the chat box. So it's moz.legislative.liaison@gmail.com. And be sure to let Sasha know if you're coming to Lobby Day so that she can hook you up with your legislator. So that's really important. So in addition to registering for Lobby Day and registering for the dinner, if you could let Sasha know that you're coming, and if you know the district that you're in, that's really helpful. I mean, she can look it up, but if you can look it up beforehand and just give it to her, that's really helpful. So again, we're all looking forward to seeing you at Lobby Day next Thursday, January 18th. Thanks.
And now we'd like to open it up for questions. Please go ahead and post your questions in the chat box, and I can unmute you. If anyone is dying to ask the first question, you can go ahead and unmute yourself. And for those on the phone, we will give you time as well to be able to unmute yourself and ask a question. We're not getting anything in the chat box exactly at this moment, so if there is anyone on the phone who, if you want to unmute yourself to be able to ask a question to any of us. No questions? We must have had the best presentation ever. Oh, here's somebody.
This is Cynthia. I have found it just very helpful to pick up cards. I mentioned it in the chat box from wherever I go, because I do send emails afterwards thanking people for their time and also reconfirming any commitments that have been made. And so I pick up those cards, and as soon as I step out in the hall, if there was a commitment or something unusual or something that we discussed or something like that, I just scribble it right on the card so I don't forget, because you may be visiting several offices and who was it that said this versus that, and those cards are just so helpful when I go to do the follow-up. So it's real easy. They all have cards. Just pick them up.
Cynthia, you just gave me an idea. I have a couple extra birth announcements I'm going to bring, because that they say thank you on them, and so there we go. I'll do that, and I'll have a baby on it too. Does anyone else have a question or a comment? Well, we must be getting more and more thorough each year if we can answer everyone's questions before we even get to the questions section.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Hi, my name is webinar from Australia. So I don't think I'll be able to go to your day. But I wanted to make a comment about lobbying. Can you still hear me?
Yes, Leslie, we can hear you now.
Great. It's been my experience here in Australia that effective lobbying happens when informed consumers are at the forefront of lobbying on behalf of midwives. And I just wanted to know if midwives, indeed, if they are lobbying it in Olympia, that they would take consumers with them. And the reason I say that is because sometimes it looks like there is a vested interest in one specific profession, when indeed it should actually be the consumers are really the ones creating the pressure for world's best practice, not the actual profession itself. I just wondered if you could talk to that a bit.
Hi, Leslie. It's Audrey Levine. You must have missed the beginning of the presentation when I talked about consumers coming to Lobby Day. So
I did.
That's okay.
I did, because I didn't realize, because I just woke up at around 7 and I went onto my email and saw that it began at your time, 6 p.m., which is my time, 7 a.m. in the morning. So I just got on. So my apologies. I must have missed.
No problem.
Sorry.
I think it's a point that bears repeating. So I'm really glad that you said it, and I cannot believe that you came on all the way from Australia. That's so yes, if you go back, you'll be able to access the slides, and you'll see that we do talk about the importance of consumers coming to Lobby Day. And in fact, historically, I would say that the majority of people who come to Lobby Day are the student midwives, and then the second largest group is midwifery consumers.
Great.
I think often the midwives themselves, perhaps feel like we've got it covered, those of us who do it every year, so they don't necessarily feel like they need to show up. But I think really having everybody all together is really powerful. But I think your point is extremely well taken, that the importance, the reason we're doing this work is for childbearing families, and not just to promote our own profession.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Leslie. Anyone else have a question before we, or a comment that you'd like to add before we kind of close for the, and that I'm realizing that slide didn't get updated. So I will say this while we're waiting for anyone else, and just interrupt me if you have a question or comment. On the slide, that really long SurveyMonkey preview URL is wrong, and I'm so sorry, but in the chat box is the correct link to the survey, and that will also be in the email that we send out, the follow-up email. So we really would like your feedback on this webinar. This is the first year we're doing a little tiny, very 3-question survey that you can get through very quickly, to just give us feedback about anything you might like to see in the future or next year, something you wish would have been different this year. So we'll look forward to that feedback. Is there anyone else before we close who has a question or comment? More things are going to be available on the Moz website soon. It takes a little while to get those edits up, and so we will be giving you everything for sure in a follow-up email, but before long that website will be up to date, and you'll be able to access everything, the legislative agenda, the talking points, as well as the slides from today, etc. Anyone else here? Okay, feel free to interrupt me, but I'll go ahead on to the last slide. In conclusion, we want to encourage you to provide feedback to help make this webinar better for next year. Please fill out our brief survey, not at the link on the slide, at the shorter SurveyMonkey link in the chat box. And thank you for joining us today. We hope to see you in Olympia next Thursday, January 18th. Do check the website or your email for the most up-to-date information, and keep up the good work in the field.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.